Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless official 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Kyle thinks he's won, but he's already lost. Here's how we know. Kyle thinks he's got one up on both Audra and Victor. His smug, confrontational behavior says it all. What's the issue? He thinks he's won, but he's already lost. He's just not aware of it yet. Kyle is the epitome of cocky and condescending at the moment. Hollering down Audra for trying to seduce him on Victor's behalf, bragging about exposing their plot, and even going so far as to throw it in the mustache's face when he's already on the warpath over Nick being locked up. An understatement would be to say that Kyle has not considered this thoroughly. Kyle Audra Y&R. Much like he's had to do with his brother Billy umpteen times, Jack warned his son not to confront Victor and provoke his wrath. Hot-headed Kyle shouted back confidently that Victor should fear his wrath. Yeah, that was when we knew his goose was well and truly cooked. Jack Kyle and Y&R. Kyle proceeded to not only square off with Victor over the plot he concocted with Audra, but to do so in front of Nikki. Now, Nikki won't be at all pleased about Victor's machinations. However, neither she nor Kyle will be able to stop what's coming. It's simply too late. Victor Nikki Kyle Y&R. While Kyle's girlfriend Claire remains curled in a ball at home mourning her dead dad, her boyfriend was in bed with his ex-lover wearing nothing but a towel. Facts. The harm will have been done whether he cries prepared or not. How, then, will she find out? You might ask. If you haven't already foreseen that Victor will have that footage sent directly to his granddaughter the minute he gets cell reception, then you don't know the Black Knight. Sure, it will hurt her, but in his mind, he'll be causing her a little heartache now to save her a whole lot of heartbreak later. He'll justify it and worry about the fallout later, which will be considerable given that he's unaware she's also dealing with Cole's death. If Victor doesn't do it, Audra will, in an attempt to hold up her end of the bargain with Victor and save Vibrante. Claire phone Y&R. It ought to be the last straw when Claire sees Kyle canoeing with Audra in the sack. If Kyle cheated, Claire's irrationality will return, and she might even fall in love with Holden, whose shoulder she has been heavily leaning on. Panic attack or not, you can't tell us she didn't notice his insane abs that night in the park. Holden Claire Park Y&R. Once Kyle gets back to Genoa City and tries to explain himself, he'll discover his girlfriend's been to bed with another man, and, yeah. Kyle has set off a chain reaction in his relationship with Claire by traveling to France with Audra to call her bluff, but he hasn't realized it yet. Do you think Kyle's missteps will end his relationship with Claire? Vote. Kyle is deeply remorseful for betraying Claire. The Young and the Restless spoiler reveal that Kyle Abbott will pay dearly for the horrible way he betrayed Claire Newman. When the truth is revealed, what are Kyle's potential repercussions? How much will his betrayal of Kyle cost? Kyle Abbott has a huge price to pay. Kyle agreed to Victor Newman's contract, which stated that he would not hurt Claire. However, Claire's father died while Kyle was on this trip with Audra Charles. A trip that was orchestrated by Victor Newman and herself. Kyle is certainly going to regret his actions. Diane Jenkins warned Kyle exactly what Audra was up to. However, Kyle swore that he could handle this. Audra was not going to get the best of him. Now Kyle can plan for this to comes back and bite him. This lack of judgment has been tried to be hidden by Kyle and Audra. However, that will cost Kyle a lot. Kyle Abbott's guilt will get to him. Kyle will certainly feel extremely guilty for what he has done. Kyle will soon return to Genoa City to inquire about Cole Howard's whereabouts. Kyle will have to face the fact that while he was in Nice getting it on with Audra. However, Claire has no idea that any of this has happened. Will she learn the truth? The truth will come out, probably delivered by Victor along with the contract signed by Kyle himself. Kyle will certainly feel bad for hurting Claire, but Victor will feel triumphant with his I told you so. Try as he might, Kyle will want to keep Claire in the dark, but there is no way this will happen. Kyle will be held accountable in the end. This will not go. Claire Newman Claire will be devastated by Kyle's betrayal. How many times did she voice her concerns about Audra? How frequently did Kyle disregard her concerns? How many times did Victor inform her of the outcome? Claire will be devastated and Kyle will see that in her eyes. Kyle may have professed his love for Claire, but he didn't show it. Victor Newman will get his punishment. Kyle doesn't know what all Victor put in that contract because he never bothered to read it. However, Kyle agreed to pay Victor $5 million as well as agreeing to move away from Genoa City. Kyle agreed to this because he believed he could keep Audra away from him. Now that he has to deal with the consequences, what will Kyle do? Victor will certainly force Kyle to pay him the $5 million that he agreed to pay. However, Kyle might discover a way to avoid going down. Unfortunately, Kyle must also face whatever fine print that Victor added. How much will Kyle's little tryst with Audra cost Kyle in the end? Kyle and Audra give in to temptation? Y&R fans need to get ready because Victor's plan to break up Kyle and Claire's relationship may work better than he thought. Audra and Kyle originally intended to plot against each other, but now things are different. The former partners began developing feelings for one another. When the truth about Kyle and Audra's feelings come out, it will be explosive. Keep in mind that Victor intended for Audra to seduce Kyle and end their relationship with Claire. Victor's plan seems to be working better than he thought because the pair have feelings for each other. The more time they spend together in nice, their feelings grow. Their feelings for each other will ruin two relationships. Kyle and Audra feel guilty for hurting Claire and Nate. In order to keep Nate and Claire from discovering the truth, they agree to keep their feelings to themselves. As soap fans know, secrets don't stay hidden for long. Audra initially followed Victor's orders to get a job. All she had to do was seduce Kyle and break up his relationship with Claire. Unfortunately, the lines blurred with stolen glances. Nate and Claire won't like the recent kiss between Kyle and Audra. The timing of Kyle and Audra's feelings couldn't be worse because Claire is dealing with the loss of her father. Nate believes Audra has stopped scheming. He's unaware that Audra is following Victor's orders and falling for her target. Nate also lost his brother while she was with Kyle. The fact that it's not just about having a one-night stand and keeping it a secret has complicated Kyle and Audra's feelings. They have genuine feelings for each other while trying to pretend that nothing is going on between them. Their chemistry ignites while they try to keep their minds on their end games. Victor's plan was to prove that Kyle wasn't good enough for Claire, but he didn't count on Audra having genuine feelings for Kyle. His plan is working better than he thinks because Kyle and Audra are fighting an attraction towards each other while trying to protect the ones they love. They won't be able to fight their attraction for each other for long. Every time they are around each other, they look at each other or touch each other. It makes things worse for them. Kyle thinks he could forget about his attraction to Audra and go back to Claire while hiding his feelings for her. Audra thinks she can continue her commitment with Nate even though she's becoming torn. The soap fans are aware that Audra and Kyle are deceiving themselves. He was walking around her shirtless, and she noticed. As mentioned earlier, they kissed each other while they were on the train. Will they give in to the growing attraction they have for one another? We all know feelings don't go away overnight. Will Claire and Nate be hurt when they fall in love? Kyle turns to Nikki for help. Ever since Kyle returned to Genoa City, he has been trying to prove he's his own man. He is. No one seems to believe him, for some reason. Maybe it's because his go-to move is to cry about how unfairly he is always being treated. This time, he scurries over to Nikki to whine that Victor hired Audra to seduce Kyle, and that will make Claire sad, and Nikki should go do something about that. For Claire's sake. Not because Kyle isn't capable of cleaning up his own messes. He's a big boy. Shut it down. Phyllis was already making scenes right and left even before Damien was stabbed. She's found new people to question and challenge now that she's found a way to make everything about her, even this. Except Lily isn't feeling it. When Phyllis snarks, Lily claps back. Lest we forget, this is Drusilla's daughter we're talking about. Triple heartbreak, move-in rejection, and ex-lovers collide. The Young and the Restless spoilers reveal that fans will see some triple heartbreak for one character while another faces a move-in rejection. Some tempting ex-lovers will collide as well. So let's talk about some major plot developments that are coming up. 1. Nate's heart breaks 3 times. Nate Hastings will begin with 3 rounds of heartbreak because he is facing some difficult blows. For starters, Nate will have to face the crushing news about Damien Kane's grim fate. Sadly, Nate's heart will break all over again when he has to tell Amy Lewis that Damien's gone forever. Since Nate has almost come to think of Amy as a mother figure, it'll be hard to see her in so much pain. When he reaches his goal, Nate's heart will break once more. We should also talk about some ex-lovers that'll prove tempting in the coming months on Y&R. Once Audra loses Nate, could that open the door to Holden Novak sizzling with his former flame? Holden has always been looking for an opportunity to reignite things with Audra. So it's possible they'll land back in bed together at some point, if only for a night. As for Nate and Victoria, they may have some temptation in their future, too. A surprise reunion story could combine Victoria's grief and Nate's drama over their breakup. With the confidence of a man who believed he had outmaneuvered the board, his adversaries, his father, and, most importantly, himself, Kyle Abbott strutted through the gleaming Jabot halls. He thought the chessboard of Genoa City was his playground, every piece moving in perfect rhythm to his secretive ambitions. Kyle felt invincible with Tucker neutralized for the time being, Audra licking her wounds, and Diane publicly backing his every move. He had manipulated his way into power plays that saw allies turn on each other and watched the fallout like a victorious emperor overlooking a conquered kingdom. Through the veil of his own overconfidence, however, Kyle missed the fact that the ground beneath him was already beginning to crumble. While he celebrated his silent coup and whispered betrayals, others were quietly circling. Summer had ceased to weep and begun to plot. She had discovered damning messages that connected Billy and Kyle to financial misdeeds intended to damage Billy's reputation. The frame job was so sophisticated that it left a digital trail that only someone who used to love Billy could understand. Victor then came along. Kyle believed that joining the Mustache would ensure his safety. But Victor plays the long game, and in Kyle's betrayal of Jack and his willingness to jeopardize the Abbott name for his own gain, Victor saw weakness, not strength. To see how far Kyle would dance before the axe fell, he had begun pulling his strings. Diane was at a breaking point, torn between motherly love and moral clarity. Even though she begged Jack not to respond, she confided in him, and Jack's silence in recent days was not an act of forgiveness but rather a strategy. The fact that, despite the fact that Kyle believed he was in charge, he was actually caught up in a web created by people much older than he had anticipated was his biggest blind spot. Phyllis, ever the wild card, uncovered evidence connecting Kyle to an off-the-books meeting with a disgraced hedge fund manager, and she wasn't keeping quiet. In fact, she just handed that evidence to Michael Baldwin, who had long suspected Kyle was playing both sides of the fence. And then came the final blow, Harrison. Summer's sudden custody motion, supported by the Newmans, threw Kyle off his rock-solid foundation of his son's affections. Kyle didn't realize until it was too late that his house of cards was already in freefall during a showdown in the courtroom that was rife with lies and secrets. Every calculated move, every deceitful alliance, every smug smirk had brought him closer to this devastating reckoning. Kyle finally realized that he had not won anything as he sat alone in the Jabot boardroom and watched a news alert flash across the screen revealing leaked documents and his shame-making headlines. In fact, he had lost everything. His trust in his family, the love of his wife, the security of his son, and, most damning of all, his own identity. The boy who once fought to be better than the legacy he feared he'd inherit had become the very villain he used to dread. Genoa City had already begun rehearsing his eulogy, despite the fact that Kyle thought he was writing his victory speech. We know from that the game was never his to win. In his never-ending quest to regain power at Jabot and establish himself as the Abbott dynasty's heir apparent, Kyle Abbott believed he could play both sides, charm his way out of trouble, and use Claire Grace as a disposable pawn. But what started out as a calculated manipulation turned into a terrifying nightmare that neither Victor nor Diane could have foreseen. Claire had come into his life as a fractured soul, damaged, yes, but not broken and certainly not foolish. She saw through Kyle's smooth words, the fake remorse, and the perfectly timed affection he weaponized to pull her strings. And when he gave her to Newman's security, he did so under the guise of protecting Harrison, lying to Claire's face, and pretending to believe in her redemption, which she didn't just break, by handing her over to Newman. She evolved. Claire had been betrayed before, but when it came from Kyle, the wound burned rather than bled. She went quiet, calculated, strategic. Claire was already 3 steps ahead of Kyle, who boasted in quiet corners of society about doing what needed to be done. Secrets started to leak: texts, voice recordings, confidential boardroom memos delivered anonymously to media outlets, Jabot competitors, and even the Newmans. Kyle's cozy alliance with Audra Charles was exposed, not just to the Abbotts, but to Summer, who confronted him in front of Harrison, shattering what remained of the co-parenting illusion. The vengeance that Claire exacted was not explosive. He wasn't arrested or publicly disgraced in one sweeping moment. He was dismantled piece by piece. First, Jack demoted him. Diane then stopped answering his calls. Victor used the betrayal as leverage to sideline Kyle from Newman projects. Summer gained full custody rights, bolstered by Claire's shocking but credible testimony that Kyle endangered their son's emotional well-being. Kyle, who had previously kicked open every door to enter the Abbott kingdom, now found himself unable to do so. And just when he thought things couldn't get worse, when he tried to reach out to Claire to apologize, perhaps rekindle what he once pretended to feel, he found her standing strong beside Victoria and Nikki, her place in the Newman fold restored, her power rising like a phoenix from the ashes of his deceit. She told him coldly, with clear, resolute eyes, "You freed me," she said. "You never broke me." Kyle lost more than just a partner. He lost control, his legacy, his son, and most damningly any chance of redemption. And as Genoa City watched his descent, Claire only grew brighter, stronger, untouchable. Kyle paid dearly. And Claire? She not only survived the betrayal, but she also buried it under her heel and proceeded unmoved. Under the weight of secrets, betrayals, and growing tension, Kyle Abbott and Audra Charles danced a dangerous tango toward igniting a slow-burning flame that had been smoldering for far too long in the smoky haze of Genoa City. Every time their eyes locked, they crossed paths in boardrooms, hotel bars, and shadowed corridors where whispered intentions could not be denied. The electricity between them was undeniable. Kyle, freshly wounded from his betrayals and battles, Claire's cold rejection, his father Jack's disappointment, his ex Summer's final, emotionless goodbye, was spiraling, desperate to reclaim power, identity, control. Audra, sly, seductive, and always underestimated, had long learned to use manipulation as art and desire as armor. But beneath the ruthless strategist lay a woman aching for a partner who understood her ambitions and wasn't afraid to match her fire. The tension reached its highest point one night following a Newman's versus Abbott's clash at Society, when too much bourbon blurred the boundaries and too many half-truths spilled over. In the silence of the suite upstairs, lit only by moonlight filtering through glass, Kyle and Audra found themselves no longer adversaries or allies but two broken souls leaning into the flame. It wasn't love. Something more hungry and darker was it. His hands trembled as he traced the line of her jaw, her breath caught as his lips ghosted her skin, and for a moment, neither cared about consequences, only about escape. The chemistry was volatile, undeniable, and when their lips met, it wasn't gentle. It was months of unspoken promises, regrets, pain, and power games exploding in one devastating kiss. Clothes dropped like confessions, and the world outside the suite vanished. However, in the aftermath, with hearts beating irregularly and skin to skin, the reality was harsher than anticipated, because neither of them had any faith in the other. Audra's eyes, still glassy, darted toward Kyle's phone, wondering who he'd text next. While resting his arm behind his head, Kyle considered how this would alter the Newman-Abbott dynamic. Had he just fallen for a trap? Or worse, did he want this? Their collective breath became a ticking clock indicating the impending disaster. Diane noticed something across town, a maternal instinct that screamed betrayal. Summer made the declaration that she was done with Kyle for good by clinking glasses with Chance. Victor Newman received a tip that the two had checked into the suite and grinned. This was leverage. This was war. Jack made a speech about legacy and redemption without realizing that Kyle's most recent error could shatter both because he was blind to the storm that was brewing under his own roof. Also, Claire? She was watching. Always on guard. She was aware that Kyle was unprepared for something real and honest, and that Audra had planned to destroy Kyle's remaining goodness. As day broke, Audra rose silently, dressing with practiced grace, pausing only to glance at Kyle still asleep, vulnerable. No longer the arrogant heir but a man who'd lost far too much to temptation. She grinned. He could be of use. Or expendable. She was still undecided. However, there was one certainty. Nothing would remain the same. Not only was their unrestrained affair a moment of weakness, but it was also a betrayal of every promise they had ever made to themselves and a declaration of war on the past. And Genoa town? It was about to burn.